Kumlan and a Black Gemara. We are up to Daf Chav Tes Amad Alo, the beginning of the third Pedic. This is the Gemara for Thursday. Eilei Naida Sheyesh Lahen Knas. The Torah gives us two laws about Knas, and that is if somebody rapes a girl, he has to pay 50 shkolim, and as a penalty to the father, and it says by a naira, girl between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. She reaches puberty at 12 with another 6 months. After that, she's called a bageris. She's a full adult, so it's like an adolescent period for a girl. We don't have that by a boy. Or if she was seduced. If she was seduced, it says that he has to marry her. He has to give him to marry her, and if she refuses, he give $50. So Elu Nairish Lagnas. The mission teacher Chiddush. Not only ordinary nairis, you have to pay that penalty, but even someone that we don't want you to marry, we discourage you from marrying, in the terms of Loisilisha, you still have to pay the penalty. Habola Mamzeris, if you seduce the Mamzeris, Al Lasina, the nation of the Sinim, that's the nation that masqueraded as if they were from a far distant country, and they came along, and then you have to give them a knas. Rashi says that the Sinim are it was also because David HaMelech decreed against them. Tosfos and most of Shem hold that it's Mahatorah, that the Sinim are forbidden. What Moshe and David know that was Geizer, was Mila, they should remain slaves. The Ramban has a third opinion. His opinion is that the first generation of the Sinim are also Mahatorah. The future generations are only us from the Gzeira. Anyway, so if you rape one of them, you have to pay the knas. Vala Kusis, and the nation of Kusis, according to Rashi, because it follows Rameh, they weren't genuine Gerim. They got scared. They were sent to Israel and Shomron, and they got scared of the lion, so they converted. So therefore, they're not really Yidden, and that's a penalty. Other Hashem have a problem with that. If they're not Yidden, then why give them a penalty at all? Therefore, they say that Kusis these are actually real Gedim, but they didn't behave correctly. And therefore, we don't want you to marry them, but nevertheless, you pay the penalty. Habo ala geyedis, on a convert, ala shvuya, on a captive, ala shivcha, on a maid. Remember, there's the only time that you pay for rape and seduction is if it's the first time. She's a psula. So these three people, geyedis, shvuya, and shivcha, depends what age they converted or they were taken or they were liberated. Shenivdu, shenis guidance, shenishachru, that they were redeemed or they were converted or they were liberated. B'chusa b'shom yom echad, less than 3 years old. Then we know that they're psula. Habo ala chayse, what about his own sister, which is forbidden to get married? Incest, the father's sister, the mother's sister, his wife's sister, his brother's wife, that the brother divorced her, as Rashi says, or he died, but he had children from another wife, so therefore there's no din of evil here. And it's talking about they never consummated the marriage, because otherwise she's a bull, and again, you don't have to pay the penalty. And your uncle's wife, and a woman who's a nida. All of these women, if you're not allowed to marry, still you have to pay the penalty. Yeshlin Knas, you have a penalty. Furthermore, even though with the incest, you're going to get chorus, and we have a concept which we can talk about in this period called Kamle B'Derava B'nei. If you commit a crime that has two punishments, you pay the more serious punishment, the death punishment, and you don't pay the penalty. And we'll learn later, according to Chizki, even if it's a shagig, we don't get the death penalty. But since it's a crime that comes with the death penalty, you are potter. And here it's kares, but kares is not a capital punishment in a court of law, and therefore this is our mission holds that for kares there's no kamla b'derabbanei. Ain't ben misas d'shemayim. There's no misas. There's no ain't ben misas bezin. There's no misas bezin, and therefore you pay the money. So the Gemara, it sounds to the Mishnah only if she's the age 12 or 12 and a half. But if they're younger than 12, you don't pay the penalty either. Who holds that? Hani, Nairas, Psulas, East. First of all, the Mishnah says, Nairas, all of these cases are examples of where girls are possible. What about a girl that's not possible? An ordinary girl. You have to pay a penalty. Hani, Nairas, Psulas, East, Luknas, Chesh, like, what Kasha don't. This is what he meant to say. Elu, Nairas, Psulas, Yes, Luknas. Kosher girls, of course, they pay knas, but even these that you would argue it's not really veloisi licha, you cannot really marry them, still you pay a penalty. Naira in Talmud says in the Mishnah only if she's a naira over 12, but that sounds like a minor you don't. Mantana, who's the author, this is Rab Meir. Rab Meir limits the window of naira. That meant naira is exclusively only a naira, not if it's a minor, not if it's a bogeris. The time you learn. Is a young girl from the day she's born until she's 12 years old. Yesh her father can sell her as a slave. Well, there ain't knas, but there's no penalty. Mishnah Torah said once she reaches puberty at 12 years old, to bargain until she's 12 and a half. Yesh knas, because the penalty if somebody seduces her or rapes her, but there ain't mecher. However, there's no sale. Even a male. Why? Should make lay down rule. Whenever you're able to sell her, ain't knas. There's no penalty. Not that there's a link between the two, but this is the rule. So whenever there's a penalty, ain't mecha. There's no sale. Chachamim disagree. They say Tana from Bas Sholosh Shana Yemechad, from 3 and over, because under 3 the psulim the Haima comes back. Over 3, Ad Shetibag until 12 and a half. Yeshla Knas. There's a penalty if you rape her. So Gemara asks, Knas I Mechela, what they don't hold that you can sell her until the age of 12. Emo, what the Gemara meant was Af Knas b'mokem mecher. They hold no, you can sell her until the age of 12, and there is a Knas over there as well until the age of 12 and a half. But the Gemara, I'm asking a question. I don't understand. Why do you pay a penalty? Can you say that Pasuk says that he should marry her? He can't marry any of these women. So why pay a penalty? Each Rula has to be somebody suitable. So we need a special limit to tell you that even though you cannot really marry these women, you still have to pay the penalty. So Shlokir says, it says in the Pasuk 3 times naira. Actually, it says twice the word naira, but the first says if you find ish, if a man finds an ish naira, psula, so it says the word naira, it's once. And then it says, and the person who seduced her has to pay avi ha naira. So it says naira a second time, plus a hey, as if it says a third time. So it says naira, naira, ha naira. Chad lagufi, one night teach you the laws of this laws. Chad lasui chayog lam, teach you that even though you cannot marry her, but there's an isa lab, never marrying her. Nevertheless, you have to pay penalty. And the chad lasui chayog, even incest, we chayav Christians, you have to pay penalty. Papa says the same principle, but from a different word. Psulos, hapsulos. The pasuk says if you find a naira psula, so that's one psula, and then it says, and this is by seduction. The other pasuk was by rape. This is by seduction. It says if you seduce a person, a psula, and then it says you should pay kimayar hapsulos, like a dowry of psulas. And there it says hapsulas again. So psulas the second time and the hey. Chadaguvi one for itself. I want to teach you about a woman who's Isolah. But a papa, my time Lakish. What's wrong? It's practically the same kind of a limit. Why don't you learn like this Lakish from the word naira? So he says we need that other hanaira for another din altogether. I need for a buy. What did Abai say? Abai said, what happens? Bolel, you rape this girl, the mesa, and then umesa, and then she died. Potter, then you don't have to pay the father the penalty. Remember, it says v'nosan lavi hanaira. Give it to the father that she's still a naira right now, and the lavi naira lavi mesa has to be alive. But Shlok, we'll talk later in the Gemara as well. What happens if she grew up in the meantime? She's no longer a naira. He's still to pay. The Shlok is my time alone. Why does the Shlok then use that papa's drasha of psula? But he says I need that for another drasha. I need it for Gzeda Shava because one they have two psukim, one by rape and one by seduction. One of them it tells you 50, and the other one it tells you shkolim. So now we know it's 50 shkolim. So we make a Gzeda Shava between the two. So we know the sum is 50, and we know also the type of money shkolim, which is full silver coins. The time we learned, which today became 200 dinar. The time we learned, Kesef Yishkol Kemoyer Apsula, Dara Apsula, Sheizek Kemoyer Apsula, Somoyer Apsula, because that this one over here is compared. No, but they compare the two, rape and seduction. But Eshlok Nami, I don't understand. But they both agree with these two drushes. So how can either of them learn what they're learning? Eshlok Nami, Mebaila, don't we need the psukim like Abaya? And a Papa Nami, Mebaila, like Shav, don't we need the psukim for the Gzeda Shava, Hapsulas? Ella. You're right. This is how we learn. There's no argument there. Shisa Kreitzi is a total of 6. Naida, Ha-Naida, then Psula, Psulas, Hapsulas. So this is what we'll do. Today, the Gufay, 2 psukim we'll use for itself to teach you the din. And Chadla Abaye, one to teach you what Abaye says, but Chadla Shava, one for Gzei Shava. Ayatrele, that leaves us 2 extra psukim. Chadla Sui Chayav, Lav, want to teach you if there's an aver of a lab, and still, you can't marry her, still, you have to pay the penalty, but Chadla Sui Chayav Krisis. And that will teach you, even incest, you have to pay penalty. This comes to exclude the following opinion. The Tanya will, because there is an opinion that says, you have to be able to marry her. Shimon Hatimni says that when do you pay the penalty? Only Isha Sheyesh B'Havoy, a woman that you can marry. Tia means marry. Only a woman that you can marry. But if you cannot marry this woman, then you don't pay a penalty. In other words, the kedushin has to be able to be a valid kedushin. Which means when not. For example, incest, you can't marry a sister, so you don't have to pay a penalty at all. And Rav Shimon ben Asi says, no, the word tiya doesn't mean that it has to be a valid kedushin, even though there's a avera, but it means isha haru, the kind of woman that does not avera at all. You're permitted to live with, even if kedushin is valid. But let's say you marry mamzeres, the kedushin you still need to get, but you're not allowed to live together. Then it's forbidden. My benai, what's the difference between the two? I'm going to say the mamzeres. Take, for example, mamzeres. The kedushin is valid, but you now live together. Unasina or this nation of the sinner, Ika benai, that's a difference. The man the one who said that kedushin has to be able to be valid, that you need a divorce to end it. The fact is that there is kedushin by mamzeres. Well, the man it has to be that you're permitted to live with her. You don't have, and there's no sin. It's not suitable, and therefore you don't have to pay. That's what would be the difference between the two. Whether you pay money in the case of mamzeres or not. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, we learned Rabbi Kiva holds that all chayavi lavin kedushin does not work at all because the children are mamzerim. So according to Rabbi Kiva, that holds that ain't kedushin toivsim b'chayavi lavin. He holds that even a lav, there's no kedushin. I mean, by mamzeres, he holds you don't need a get because there's no kedushin whatsoever. He talks there about the case when you take back your wife after she married somebody else and take it back. It's only a lav, and he says that there's no kedushin there whatsoever. Is my benayu. So what's the difference? There's no kedushin wherever there's an avera. So what's the difference between Shimon Timni or Shimon bebenasya? The difference is almana lekohen gadol, not when there's a lav. When, for example, there's a mitzvah asay, almana marrying a kohen gadol. Almana marrying kohen gadol is what is only an asay. A kohen gadol should marry what do you call it? Rabbi Kiva's moide, according to Shimon Menashe. Rabbi Kiva's moide that almana the kohen gadol, that there the kedushin is chal. Why is the kedusha chal? It's a lav. It's not, sorry, I said it's not a say. It's not a lav. You're not allowed to marry a almana. So why, according to Rabbi Akiva, all other lav and there's no kedusha? Why here there is? You learn from the pasuk. How? The Tanya from Ayman min hakoy Rabbi Akiva in any aveda lav. Rabbi Akiva said there's no kedusha in the trials of mamzer chutz ma'amana can go to why? Because the Torah clearly spells out the consequences. Torah said la'yikach, you shouldn't marry a kohen, should not marry an almana. And then what happens if you do? Your children will be desecrated, will become chalalim. So clearly the Torah is limiting the consequences. Oh, it doesn't chawal. Ain't oisa mamzerim, but no mamzerim. Says the Gemara. Okay, okay. So that will be the difference. Amana can go. The kedushin are valid, but it's an avera. That will be the difference between Shimon Menashe and Shimon Hatimni. Says the Gemara, and according to Rabbi Shefer, we had this in Yevamos as well. The Amar, he said, we should scream and shout against Akiva. He's creating so many mamzer. He's making so many possibilities to have mamzerim. All he's doing is increasing mamzerim amongst the Jewish people. So he would say, Kol she'ein le'bi so that anyone that should not be living together have lot mamzer. No, but it seems like Rabbi Shefer's understanding Shimon Masani that even what do you call it? Amana and Godel, the kid will be a mamzer. Is my benayah. At the end of the day, any time you're not allowed to live together, there's no kedushin. So what's the difference? Shimon Hatimni and Shimon Menashe. The difference is chayove asay, where the Torah says you're not allowed to marry the person. Let's say don't. It says you that in the third generation they can come back, and that is mitzi ve'edoimi. Chayove asay. There, the kedushin achal, even according to Rabbi Akiva, even according to Rabbi Shimon Menashe, the kedushin according to Rabbi not like Rabbi Sheva, the kedushin achal, but it's a sin, and that will be the difference. So Rabbi Sheva, that makes sense according to Rabbi Sheva. He laughed who came at time, but Rabbi Samai kasi. If Rabbi Sheva was coming merely to argue with Rabbi Samai, fine. So he's coming to add chiyuv yaseh, that what Rabbi Samai holds only limited to lavin, and comes along and he says no. That even he understood Rabbi Akiva holds that even if there's aseh, there's no kedushin and the children mamzerim. But according to Rabbi Samai, there's no mamzer. Fine. So that would be a difference of Samai. What do you call? That would be a difference between what do you call it? Between Rabbi Samai and Shimon Menashe and Rabbi Akiva. Fine. According to Rabbi Samai. Eli time in the if he's not explaining. If Rabbi Sheva is actually explaining his own opinion, then if he's not commenting on Rabbi Shema, he's talking only about Lavin, and the only thing Rabbi Sheva is coming to add is Amon Kohen Gadol, but he's actually giving his own opinion and his opinion is anything within an Avera. According to Rabbi Akiva, the Charles and Mamzer, even including mitzvah say the Charles and Mamzer. If you according to that, what would be the difference between Shimon Menashe and Shimon Timni? They both say that that according to both of them, even an asay, it's an avera, and kedusha and chal according to Rabbi Sheviv. So then the children will be mamzerim. So what's the difference which Rasha it is? Says the Gemara, either one there's no kedusha and children mamzerim, and you don't have to pay the class. So he says over here. The difference would be if the Kohen Gadol is supposed to marry a psula, a virgin, and he marries someone who's a beula, and that's the difference. And over there, what do you call it? There's no lav, right? There's no lav over here. There's only an asay of a besula yikach, and so on. Now, how can she be, if she's a bula, then why are you paying a penalty? The whole thing is only if she's a virgin, because Rashi explains that his relationship with her was loikadark, the unconventional way. So she's still a psula. So what? It's still an Aveir and Asay. And we just said according to Rabbi Sheva, whenever there's an Aveir, the children Mamzedim, and it's always awesome. So why should this be different? For the Angmar answered, the Asay She'ein Sham B'Kol. And Gil introduced in the beginning of Yomas, above that by Koinim, if this is an Asay limited, let's say, only to Koinim, it becomes a much weaker Asay. And that kind of an Asay, even Rabbi Kiva's Maida, the children are not Mamzedim. Okay, we'll pause over here.